The moon of Selvar 9 didn't scream. It couldn't. It simply cracked, folded inward, and erupted into a halo of molten shards under the relentless beams of the Valen Empire's planetary lances. From a bridge of the Dominion Spear, a warship the size of a continent, the destruction looked like art. Crimson fissures splitting pale stone, a shockwave boiling the thin atmosphere to vapor. A spectacle designed to terrify. High Executor Malric Dale stood at the observation dais, his tall, ash-gray form illuminated by the firestorm below. His black ceremonial armor reflected the chaos like polished obsidian. "Let the galaxy bear witness," he declared, voice booming through the ship's broadcasting arrays. "This is the price of defiance. The human coalition will surrender or they will follow." Millions across a dozen sectors watched the feed. News outlets replayed it in slow motion. Analysts dissected the blast yields, and Valen citizens praised their empire's strength with rehearsed reverence. To them, this was a natural order: fear first, obedience second. Aboard the far smaller human diplomatic vessel Courier Dawn, orbiting a safe distance from the carnage, Captain Elias Corrin swirled the last inch of coffee in a battered steel mug. The tremor of the moon's final collapse rippled through their sensors as a soft tremble under his boots. "They really went for full fireworks package," muttered Ensign Laura Nix, scanning the aftermath with a pale face. Population was what? 40,000 miners. 43, said Corrin. He didn't check his datapad. He already knew. Half were off-world at the time. The rest didn't get a vote. The bridge fell quiet except for the softened consoles. Outside, chunks of Selvar 9 drifted like embers on a cosmic wind. The Valen fleet kept formation, hundreds of blade-shaped dreadnoughts, their edges glowing faintly with residual heat. "They expect us to fold after this," said Commander Hale, the ship's first officer. "It's the same playbook they've used for centuries. Burn one world, make the others beg for mercy." Corrin set the mug down, watching the swirling debris cloud with unreadable calm. "Except we're not very good at begging." Hale's jaw tightened. "So what's the plan, sir?" "Fleet High Command hasn't given clearance for open war. They want a diplomatic resolution, whatever that means after this." "It means we talk first," Corrin replied. "And when they stop listening, we make them here's another way." Nix gave him a wary look. "They just turned the moon into a crater field to send a message. You want to walk into their throne room and what? Negotiate. Something like that." He rose, straightened his collar, and tugged the crease from his dark blue diplomat's coat. The insignia on his breast, a simple silver coil, symbol of the Human Coalition's Envoy Corps, caught the cold starlight. "The High Executor will want a show. Let's give him one." Hours later, a secure channel opened. The massive form of Malric Dale filled the Courier Dawn's main display, his sharp, ridged features arranged into a look of imperial disdain. Rows of gold-plated officers stood behind him like a living monument to discipline. "Human emissary," Malric intoned, "you witnessed the fate of Selva 9. This demonstration was merciful compared to what awaits your colonies should you persist in your insolence. Deliver your unconditional surrender within 3 cycles, or your people will choke on ash." Corrin's face appeared in the corner of the transmission, composed, almost casual. "Impressive pyrotechnics," he said. "Very dramatic. Did you choreograph the moon break in advance, or was it more of a spontaneous expression of imperial frustration?" The Valen officers stirred. One stepped forward, mandibles flaring in anger. "You dare!" Malric silenced him with a single raised hand. His amber eyes narrowed. "You find annihilation amusing?" "I find overcompensation fascinating," Corrin replied evenly. "You turned a mining outpost into a light show. Billions watched, yes, but not in awe." Some of them laughed. The High Executor's fingers tightened on the railing. "Laughed? Humans tend to do that when someone waves a gun and expect applause." Corrin said, "You want to frighten us into obedience, but fear isn't a language we're fluent in." A faint, dry chuckle escaped from somewhere among the human crew. Malric's jaw shifted in displeasure. "Your insolence will end in ruin," the executor said, voice low. "Our fleets are already in motion. The council may send diplomats, but they will kneel or they will burn." Corin leaned slightly forward, meeting the Predator's gaze without a flicker. Then I'll save you a seat. I'll be aboard your flagship in 20 hours. Let's discuss the terms of this war before you start misplacing more moons. The transmission cut abruptly. The bridge lights flickered as the channel closed, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. Nix exhaled sharply. Sir, that sounded a lot like volunteering for execution. Hale's brow furrowed. They'll either kill you on sight or try to parade you as a trophy. Or, Corin said, picking up his mug again, they'll underestimate us one more time. And that's when we start winning. He didn't smile, but there was something in his tone, half calculation, half mischief, that set the bridge crew exchanging uneasy glances. Outside, the ruins of Selva 9 continued their silent orbit, a monument to the Empire's power and to the audacity that would soon challenge it. The Courier Dawn docked with a Dominion spear under the watch of 100 guns. Automated turrets traced their path with cold precision, and the docking corridor sealed with a hiss that sounded too much like a predator inhaling. Captain Elias Corin stepped out first, hands loosely clasped behind his back, flanked by two aides dressed in the understated navy of a human coalition envoy corps. The Valen Honor Guard lined the corridor. If honor could describe a formation that looked more like a firing squad. Their armor was black with etched copper sigils, each bearing a long rifle slung across a rigid spine. The corridor led directly to the grand negotiation hall, a cavernous chamber of obsidian pillars and a central dais shaped like a blade's edge. High Executor Malverick Dale waited there, towering over his subordinates. His presence filled the room as much as the shadows did. On his right, a cluster of officers in ceremonial bronze kept their expressions locked between contempt and curiosity. Human envoy, Malverick began, his voice rolling to the hall like distant thunder. You stand upon the heart of the Empire. This is your chance to beg for leniency. Corin did not bow. He inclined his head slightly, acknowledgment without submission. I was told we'd be discussing terms, not auditioning for a tragedy. A ripple went through the officers. One stepped forward, mandibles clicking in irritation. This is no theater. You come as supplicant, not jester. Corin's gaze swept the hall, lingering just long enough on each figure to be noticed. Supplicant? No. Representative of a people who find your showmanship. Underwhelming? Absolutely. The silence stretched. Somewhere in the upper balconies, a recorder drone clicked as it adjusted its lens. The entire exchange was being broadcast live to both Valen and human-aligned channels. That was the point. Malverick wanted to terrify the galaxy. Instead, the envoy had just called his demonstration unimpressive. On his own ship, Malverick descended the dais with measured steps. You mocked the power that erased Selvar, 9 in a single volley. Your fleets are scattered, your allies hesitant. One command from me, and your colonies will fall like dominoes. Corin allowed a faint smile to touch his lips. And yet, you're talking to me. That tells me you're worried about something. Maybe not us, yet, but about how the galaxy sees you after that little light show. You think the galaxy pities you? Malverick's tone sharpened. They saw fear. They saw overreach, Corin countered. They saw an empire that needed to destroy a moon to make a point it couldn't deliver with words. A whisper ran through the hall, quickly stifled. Malverick's claws curled slightly against the hilt of a ceremonial blade. Enough riddles. State your terms. My terms? Corin tilted his head, as if considering a mildly absurd request. No, you issued the ultimatum. You asked for surrender. You showed your teeth. We're here to see if you have a brain behind them. One of the aides suppressed a cough that sounded suspiciously like a laugh. The recorder drones caught it. Within hours, that moment would be replayed across human networks with captions already forming. Malverick's expression did not change, but a vein of cold fury laced his voice. You presume to insult me in my hall. I presume nothing, Corin replied. I'm here to determine if this conflict can end before it starts. But if you expect humanity to crawl, you'll be sorely disappointed. An officer barked. You dare speak so when your worlds lie exposed? Corin turned his gaze to the speaker, calm as glass. You've already fired your grand warning shot. You won't get to fire it twice without consequence. That earned a visible pause. Several officers exchanged glances, the first hint of uncertainty cracking through their polished facade. The humans had not come afraid. They had come calculating. Malric straightened, towering over the envoy by nearly 3 heads. "You play a dangerous game, Captain Corrin." "It's not a game," Corrin said quietly. "It's a conversation you thought you could have with a gun alone." For a heartbeat, the hall was still. The flicker of the docking corridor status lights reflected in Malric's armor as if searching for a tremor. There was none. The High Executor finally spoke, low and deliberate. 3 cycles remain. Deliver your surrender, or we erase another world. Leave my ship. Corrin inclined his head again, just as shallow as before. We'll make our decision. And while we do, you might want to review how often fear turns to laughter when it's repeated. He turned, Kate brushing the polished floor, and led his aides out without waiting for escort. The guards' rifles tracked him until the doors sealed. On the return shuttle, Ensign Nix broke the tense quiet. Was that supposed to go that way? It went exactly the way it needed to, Corrin said, fastening his restraint harness as the shuttle disengaged. They wanted to project control. Instead, they broadcast their frustration. Commander Hale, reviewing the recorded transmission on his wrist console, frowned. "Half the sector saw you mock the executor to his face." "Good," Corrin murmured. "Mockery spreads faster than terror. Fear freezes people. Laughter moves them." Nix arched an eyebrow. "You think that's enough to stop them from firing on our colonies?" "Not by itself," Corrin admitted. "But we planted the first crack. Empires built on fear collapse faster when fear starts looking ridiculous." The shuttle thrusters engaged, carrying them back toward the Courier Dawn. Outside the viewport, the Dominion spear loomed like a blade in the dark, its hull still gleaming with the echoes of its recent massacre. Somewhere inside, Malric Dale watched his carefully scripted performance unravel. And somewhere across the stars, billions replayed the envoy's words, some in shock, some in awe, and many with a grin they hadn't dared wear yesterday. The Courier Dawn slipped into the shadow of a gas giant, hidden behind the mottled storms of Vela's frontier sector. Within its narrow conference chamber, Captain Elias Corrin reviewed the data streams cascading across the hollow table. Intercepted broadcasts, encrypted memos, and, most importantly, the Empire's public feed. "They rebroadcast a negotiation," said Ensign Nix, tapping a projection. "But they edited out your remarks about overreach. The cut jumps from their ultimatum straight to your promise to consider it." Corrin traced the splice with a fingertip. Predictable. They think control means controlling the narrative. Commander Hale leaned against the bulkhead, arms folded. "Our channels didn't. The raw feed's gone viral in 3 sectors. Miners on Taro Station are making caricatures of the High Executor out of air filters." "That's how it starts," Corrin murmured. "Fear cracks faster when ridicule finds a foothold." A low hum resonated through the room as their communications specialist, Aaron Cade, initiated the next phase. Strings of coded signals flicker across the hollow table, destined for news nodes, neutral trade guilds, and independent broadcast arrays. "We're seeding the raw footage everywhere they don't fully control," Cade reported. "Within a cycle, every tavern screen from the rim to the core will have seen you tell the executor his moon-breaking stunt was unimpressive." Hale's brow furrowed. "That makes you a target." "Already am," Corrin replied. "But this isn't about me. It's about the idea that their intimidation is theater. Once people start seeing it that way, the fear becomes a punchline." Across the galaxy, the punchline grew legs. On the bustling trade world of Athren, dock workers gathered around flickering hollow panels, snickering at a crude animation of the High Executor stomping his foot as a human sipped coffee. In the academies of 2 neutral species, political lecturers debated whether the Empire had overplayed its hand. Merchant lords whispered about how public opinion was turning against heavy-handed blockades. The Valen Propaganda Division tried to smother it with a flood of new broadcasts, images of their fleets parading in perfect formation, decrees of strength, promises of restored order. But the harder they pushed, the more hollow it appeared beside the circulating clips of Malric Dale being mocked on his own ship. 2 days later, Corrin received a private channel from an unexpected source. A Valen Systems governor, encrypted through 3 relays. The alien's narrow, scaled face flickered on the screen, voice low and wary. "You've stirred something," the governor said. Supply crews whisper. Soldiers question orders. They laugh in corners, quietly. "It is dangerous." "For them or for you?" Corrin asked. "For anyone who forgets the executor's temper," the governor replied. "Be careful, human. His patience is shorter than his memory." The channel cut before Corrin could respond. Hale frowned. "That's a risk, sir. If they start purging suspected sympathizers." "They won't," Corrin interrupted. "Not yet. Purges will confirm their weakness. Malverick needs a galaxy to believe he's untouchable." Nix looked up from her console. "And when that belief dies, then his empire starts to bleed without a shot fired," Corrin said. The empire, however, did not remain still. Their fleets tightened blockades around 3 coalition-linked worlds. Patrols intercepted trade convoys, claiming contraband, confiscating shipments. Official statements blamed terrorist manipulation. The tone shifted from threats of annihilation to accusations of insolence, as if the humans had spat on their boots in public. Inside the Dominion Spear, Malverick Dale prowled his war council chambers. "Show me the numbers," he demanded, tail lashing against the polished floor. "How far has this mockery spread?" A subordinate officer hesitated before replying. 17 outer sectors report increased resistance to our decrees. Dock workers delay shipments. Several minor houses refuse to renew their tribute contracts. Because of one insolent envoy, Malverick's claws flexed. "No, this is sabotage. Human media networks are amplifying it," the officer admitted, "but other species are carrying it further. Some are amused." "Amused," Malverick repeated, tasting the word like poison. "They should fear me." On the Courier Dawn, Corrin drafted the next communique. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a promise. It was a simple statement sent through unofficial channels, a message designed to echo, "If fear alone kept your empire together, it was already weaker than you thought." Nix handed him a report. "Our coalition allies are split. Half want to escalate militarily. Half want to wait. They're watching what you do next." "Then we give them time," Corrin said. "Time is the one thing the Empire can't parade." He activated the message. Signals rippled outward, a quiet tide beneath the noise of fleets and fire. That evening, as the ship drifted in the shadow of a cold star, Corrin stood alone in the observation deck. The shattered moon of Selvar. 9 was a distant smear now, a memory of the Empire's opening act. He thought of the miners lost, of the laughter spreading through channels not meant to carry courage, and of the executor pacing his halls, furious at a species that wouldn't play its part. Hale entered, carrying 2 steaming mugs. "They'll strike back soon," he said, offering one. "They already did," Corrin replied. "The moment they censored the footage, they admitted we got through." Hale sipped, eyes narrowing at the drifting void. "You think the galaxy's ready to follow a joke instead of a gun?" Corrin allowed a faint smile. "Not a joke. A reminder. Empires fall when they forget who's watching." Elsewhere, in dim-lit stations and frontier taverns, the story spread. How a human envoy stood on the deck of the most feared warship in known space and told its master his terror was unimpressive. It was no longer just news. It was a seed. And seeds, Corrin knew, had a way of breaking stone. Quietly, then all at once. The Dominion Spear prepared for war. Its vast hangar decks glowed with the pulse of active reactors, carriers sliding into formation like sharpened blades. Imperial fleet orders streamed across the sectors. Blockade reinforcements, new staging points, lists of priority targets drawn with the precision of a knife against a map. High Executor Malverick Dale stood before the War Council, one clawed hand resting on the curved tactical table. 3 cycles have passed. Humanity refuses to kneel. They spread mockery as though it were armor. We will shatter both. An officer spoke, voice stiff. Resistance grows where their envoy's broadcast circulates. Doc, guilds delay shipments. Mercenary contracts are dissolving. The sectors whisper that our might is overstated. Malrick's eyes glinted. Then they will witness what overstated means. He gave the order to mobilize the 9th and 11th fleets toward the frontier world of Arkan 3, a human settlement of 12 million. The intent was clear. Erase their defiance publicly, leave no doubt. The council acknowledged with muted gestures, yet unease lingered in the air, a faint crackle beneath the grand machinery of war. On the Courier Dawn, the mood was taut but not panicked. Captain Elias Corrin reviewed intercepted logistics reports with Hale and Nix in the dim-lit strategy room. Hollow projections revealed sudden gaps in Imperial convoys, rerouted supply lines, and stalled fuel depots. "They're moving heavy," Hale noted, tapping a cluster of icons. "But look, these choke points here and here. Delays at Rhino Gate. Shortages at 2 staging hubs. That's not standard." "It's the ripple effect," Corrin said. "Mockery makes people slow. Crews drag their feet. Merchants misplace cargo. Subcommanders hesitate to overextend. One snicker in a docking bay turns into 3 days of waiting for a shipment." Nix frowned. "That won't stop a fleet the size of theirs." "No," Corrin agreed, "but it buys time, and time lets us choose where they stumble." 20 hours later, the Dominion Spear entered the Rhino Gate corridor, an artificial wormhole network that should have opened into clean, safe passage. Instead, their sensors filled with static. The gate lattice had been tampered with. Sabotage from within. 3 support cruisers emerged fragmented, torn apart by an unstable jump. Supply lines fractured before the fleet could even form. Malrick stood on the bridge, fury barely restrained. "Who authorized maintenance on this gate?" The officer's answer was hesitant. "It was routine. Records show signed approval from sector administration." "Find them," Malrick said coldly, "and send their families to the penal moons." Meanwhile, across the sector, human-aligned broadcasters leaked new footage. Images of Imperial cargo convoys idling while their crews passed time gambling. Intercepted memos revealing shortages. Whispers of the Empire's march was already stumbling. In a secure message, one neutral governor addressed Corrin directly. "You've made them look clumsy. The galaxy is listening." Corrin and Hale discussed their next move in the observation deck. The starfield drifted, cold and wide. "They'll still come," Hale said. "A crippled beast still bites." "Yes," Corrin replied, "but the bite no longer scares a herd." He keyed a transmission toward Coalition Command. "Prepare contingencies. Not for a battle we can't win head-on, but for the one they start losing on their own." As Imperial fleets limped toward Arkan 3, local resistance erupted, not in open war, but in small, precise acts. Refueling ports miscalculating fuel transfers, navigation relays transmitting false coordinates, civilian channels flooding the networks with satirical renditions of the High Executor's ultimatum. A particular clip, a crude animation of Malrick shouting at a collapsing moon while humans sip tea, spread across 6 systems overnight. By the time the Dominion Spear arrived, its escort numbers were half strength. Supplies ran low. The carefully timed assault faltered before the first shot. Inside the Imperial war room, Malrick raged. "How does laughter cripple fleets? How does mockery turn my orders into delays?" A younger strategist hesitated, then spoke. "Executor, the perception of inevitability is fracturing. Officers second-guess commands. They fear ridicule more than your wrath." Malrick's tail lashed the floor. "Then they will fear both." He summoned Corrin again, this time privately, in a sealed chamber aboard the flagship. The envoy arrived without flinching, hands clasped behind his back, expression steady. "You've done this," Malrick accused. "You poisoned my empire without firing a weapon." Corrin regarded the towering alien evenly. "No, you poisoned it yourself. I just held up a mirror. You think this mockery makes you safe?" "I think it makes you slow," Corrin said. "And slow is all we needed." Malrick stepped closer, voice low and dangerous. "You will not leave this ship alive." Corrin did not move. "Kill me, and every sector that laughs today will rise tomorrow. Let me walk out, and you can pretend you still hold control." For a moment, The air between them felt like drawn steel. Malverick's claws flexed, then lowered. Go. But know this. When the fire comes, it will burn hot enough to silence even your jokes. Corrin's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. Then you'd better hurry. The envoy departed under heavy escort, the hum of the docking seals trailing behind like a drumbeat. On the return to the Courier Dawn, Hale broke the silence. You keep needling a predator in its own den, he said. One day it will bite. It already tried, Corrin replied. It missed. Across the galaxy, something shifted. The Empire still possessed fleets, weapons, legions, but the illusion of inevitability cracked. Where there was once fear, there was now hesitation. Where there was silence, whispers grew bold. And in that hesitation, humanity found its opening. The Empire's grand assault on Archen 3 never came. The 9th Fleet arrived days behind schedule, stripped of half its fuel and most of its supplies. The 11th limped in 2 cycles later, splintered from misrouted jumps. Their once synchronized march had become a staggered procession of damaged pride. On the observation deck of the Courier Dawn, Captain Elias Corrin watched the distant streaks of the retreating ships with quiet focus. The stars reflected in his eyes, cold and steady. Commander Hale joined him, carrying a datapad filled with the latest sector reports. They're pulling back, Hale said. Orders to consolidate, rearm, investigate sabotage across 5 gates. Officially, they call it a tactical withdrawal. Unofficially, Corrin asked, they're humiliated. Half their subordinate governors are refusing to commit more ships. Crews are deserting at the edges. Whatever they hope to prove with Selvar 9, they prove the opposite, Corrin finished. Terror is brittle when it expects applause. Across the galaxy, the cracks widened. Merchants who once paid tribute raised prices or withheld shipments entirely. Neutral stations quietly turned coalition-friendly. The footage of Corrin's confrontation with Malverick Dale played in endless loops, each edit sharper than the last. Memes became slogans. Slogans became protest banners. The Empire tried to flood the networks with counter-broadcasts, declarations of strength, footage of marching troops, promises of swift retribution. But the tone had shifted. Every declaration was mocked before the echo faded. Their spectacle no longer commanded silence. It invited parody. Corrin stood before the Coalition Council via secure hololink, a dozen human and allied representatives watching from their separate chambers. You're telling us we won without firing a major shot, one counselor said, skepticism thick in her voice. No, Corrin corrected. I'm saying they lost their aura. That's more valuable than a dozen battles. Their fleets still exist. Their armies still march. But the myth that made their conquest easy, it's gone. Another counselor leaned forward. And what do you propose we do now? Hold our ground, Corrin said. Don't overreach. Let them scramble to save face. Every frantic move they make only deepens the doubt. The High Executor, meanwhile, faced a council far less unified than before. Governors questioned supply allocations. Admirals avoided his summons. Malverick Dale paced the throne hall, the polished obsidian beneath his feet catching faint distortions of his silhouette. He called for another audience with the human envoy, this time without broadcast, without the theater of ranks behind him. The chamber was stark, the light harsh. You did this, Malverick said without preamble. Not with fleets, with words. Corrin clasped his hands behind his back, voice even. You wanted a galaxy afraid of you. Instead, you made it curious about us. Malverick's gaze was a blade. You mock what could still burn your colonies to dust. You could, Corrin admitted, but every shot you fire now looks like desperation. You've already shown them your biggest gun. The rest is just noise. For the first time, the High Executor said nothing. The silence lingered like a held breath. Finally, Malverick spoke, each word carved from restraint. This isn't over. No, Corrin agreed, but it's no longer yours to dictate. When the envoy returned to the Courier Dawn, Hale met him at the airlock. Did he threaten you again? No, Corrin said, stepping past him. He promised the future would be long. Hale snorted. Cryptic. Desperate, Corin corrected. In the following cycles, the Empire announced a strategic recalibration, a phrase that failed to hide its retreat. Arcan 3 remained free. Selvar 9's ruins became a memorial, not a warning. Coalition worlds, once preparing for evacuation, resumed trade. The laughter didn't stop. It became a low hum beneath galactic politics, a reminder that fear could fracture under its own weight. One evening, Corin stood alone in the observation deck, mug in hand, stars stretching like frozen waves beyond the glass. Nyx entered quietly. "You think they'll come back?" she asked. "Empires always come back," Corin said. "They rewrite the story, paint over cracks, call it renewal, but the memory doesn't fade." Nyx glanced at the scattered reports. "And us? Do we stay the punchline or become the example?" Corin sipped his lukewarm coffee, the same battered mug he'd held the day Selvar 9 burned. "Neither. We stay ready." The joke worked once because it was unexpected. Next time, they'll expect it. Far across the void, in the hidden chambers of the Valen core, Malric Dale convened with his most loyal commanders. His empire was not broken, only bruised. But the bruise would linger, and bruises taught caution. He traced a claw over a map of the outer sectors, eyes narrowing. They think laughter makes them untouchable. Let them think it. We will wait. The Courier Dawn departed the contested sector weeks later, its mission officially marked as diplomatic containment. Corin filed his report, a record of conversations, disruptions, delays, and a single truth that had echoed louder than the Empire's guns. Sometimes the most dangerous weapon was not a fleet, nor a fortress, nor a devastating moon-breaking beam. Sometimes it was a refusal to take a tyrant seriously.